Welcome to a very special Indianomics. The default rate at microfinance companies don't seem to be ebbing. That may be part of the reason why the microfinance SRO, self-regulating organization, MFIN, pushed back its new rules that only 3 loans may be given per borrower. It has been deferred to April 2025 from the earlier deadline of January 1, 2025. To get a 360-degree perspective of the microfinance industry's problems, I have with me today an elite panel. Joining me are Aishwary Khandelwal, the Associate Director, India Ratings and Research; Chandan Thakur, Deputy Director, Sa-dhan, which is also a self-regulatory organization of microfinance institutions; Sachin Seth, the Regional MD, India and South Asia at CRIF. CRIF is a credit scoring, much like civil; and Anu Jogesh, a special guest here. She's a PhD doctoral researcher from the London School of Economics and Politics. For the last 6 months, has been touring extensively in rural North India, but more specially, she is an ex-CNBC-TV18. 18 years ago, she worked with us as our star FMCG reporter. So, gentlemen and Anu, thank you very much for joining me. Well, let me start with Sachin Seth first. Sachin, if you can lay down the data itself, according to the scoring sheet, have the default rate increased for MFI borrowers?
Yeah, Latha. So, Latha, thanks for having me here. And yeah, I mean, all of us are seeing that stress for last couple of quarters. And as per the latest report, CRIF has released just recently, I mean, there is obviously a bit of a stress which continues. And specifically to the numbers, as I think most of the people do have the report, that, when we talk about, loan at risk between, let's say, 31 to 90 days, it is almost 2.8%. And if you take 31 to 90 plus 90 and 180 together, it comes to about 5.2%, right? And that's obviously a bit of increase from the previous quarter. So definitely it continues to be a bit stressed portfolio at this moment.
Okay. Chandan, what's your sense? I guess, 1 minute, Mr. Seth, this number is as of what, October?
Well, this number is as of cut-off September end.
Okay.
Because obviously the data gets pulled and then get processed and the report gets published.
So your October, November, December data is awaited. Chandan, what's the situation on the ground? Do you think December things improved, or they are pretty stressed? Because otherwise MFIN would not have pushed back the deadline.
So thanks, Latha. I think Sachin has already mentioned like the number has increased a bit. But I would also like to highlight a bit like why the number has increased. And in the first quarter itself, a few major regions. One was like, of course, the general election, the climate issues, the unprecedented heat. And one more thing is that I would like to highlight, even post-COVID, we know like the demand in the sector. I mean, the loan has gone up in terms of disbursement and all. But in terms of the employment generation to pay back the loan, that is still not, up to the mark, even in the rural area. So that unemployment or in terms of the repayment capacity is not as much in terms of the pre-COVID era. So that is one of the reasons a bit like the number has gone up. However, we are sure in terms of we are really optimistic in terms of the good Kharif season and some preventive measures has been taken by both the SROs. So things are getting better with every passing day, and we are sure like in the last quarter, like this quarter, in the quarter, result will be better in terms of the favorable for the sector. And hopefully from next financial year onwards, we will be back to the normalcy.
Yeah.
So,
no, Chandan, I was going to ask all of you what you all see as the reasons for the issue. Thanks for starting it off. But you are saying that December numbers, by your guess, would be better than the September numbers. Is that your, I mean, I know it's anecdotal, but is that your guess?
it would be more or less same. I mean, September number and December number would be more or less same.
More or less same.
So like the last quarter, the March figure would be better than,
so the current quarter you're expecting better. Yeah, I guess we live in that hope. Aishwary, you would have more granular details. Would you say that Q3 would have been just stable, or could it have gotten worse?
So I would say, I mean, Q3 delinquencies is expected to peak out in terms of the delinquencies numbers. I think 4Q onwards, we could see some, the decline in delinquencies is expected to stop now from the 4Q onwards. But the stress in the microfinance sector, we believe is still 2-3 quarters. We expect it continues to stay. The normalization is expected to from second half of FY26 itself. I mean, what we have mentioned it in the report, because if you look at the stage 2 loans, which is 30 to 90 DPD, it continues to increase, which indicates that there's still remaining stress in the sector, which would be coming out in the third quarter results also. So unless this stage 2 loans declines, the stress will continue to be evolved in the next quarter also. So we expect, the normalcy in the delinquencies is still 2-3 quarters away.
Okay, I get your point. But what you're saying is that even more defaults than Q3 perhaps will not happen in Q4, but declines will take time, correct? Okay, Anu Jogesh, you were touring in rural India when the news came that MFIN is asking all the lenders to restrict the number of loans to 3 per borrower.
Yes.
How was it received?
Well, it was actually very slow, but what we essentially saw, what I saw is that even what they call center heads, women who are part of these baithaks, who are essentially, head of the joint liability groups, were also struggling to pay back. These are supposed to be borrowers who have the capacity to pay back well and were struggling. And we heard from loan officers that essentially there were people leaving houses and going away. Likely to try, well, they say absconding bhag gaye hain, but actually they're likely going to be with their husbands who are in cities to try and earn something to come back. Because it's important to note where this money is coming from, what's paying back. And as one of your guests said, it's not rural and farm income that's largely paying this back. It's often when I sit in these baithaks, it is women waiting on the phone for their husbands who do paint polish ka kaam or do construction work or drive taxis in Mumbai, Bangalore, Pune to essentially pay that money back. And it's literally that interest payment. So kisht se kisht. So interest payment to interest payment, they are waiting for money to essentially come in.
Bringing down the to 3 borrowers is not easy because you're usually taking one loan to pay the premium.
Exactly. You are taking one loan to pay for the other. And if you're not, because you suddenly have a limit, you're depending on your local relationships. So a lot of loan officers call this pipelining, which is, I need money, I've exhausted my number, so I've borrowed in your name. And then I've left you to pay it back.
Okay, so that's a big social issue. Chandan, what is your sense? Why did MFIN push it back? Would it have been utter chaos if they had stuck to the Jan 1st deadline?
We all know that there are stress, there are cases of over leveraging, multiple lending and all. Even we had one meeting with all the CEOs with MFI, and we released the Sankalp guidelines also. Where did we and along with all the MFIs, we have agreed upon to follow up, to follow the guidelines in terms of all the due diligence practices, following the household income, following the the credit bureau check and all those stuff. And if you are complying with all the guidelines like FOIR of prescribed by the Reserve Bank, the number of lenders will automatically come down. And with new
Lekin rule, why was the rule deferred? Did the microfinance guys come and tell you that there is too much pain at the bottom of the pyramid, so please push back the rule? What was the reason for that deferral?
See, the amount of disbursement, of course, the disbursement has gone down. So it takes a bit of time to, to restrict with the numbers with 2, 3 or any particular number like that. Because it's a gradual process. So that might be one of the underlying reason.
Okay. Mr. Seth, what's your sense? Has the number of borrowers with 4 loans increased in the third quarter?
So, Latha, as we are seeing the trend and based on purely on the data, while we have observed that, the SROs are working towards sort of putting guardrails, etc., or implementation of that, but I think many of the lenders consciously have started doing that. And we are also seeing the improvement of that. So if you see the data we have published, it shows that there is a percentage point, improvement in terms of let's say, reduction in the number of, so whatever lending is happening today, there is a percentage point improvement in terms of number of borrowers or number of lenders to a borrower is coming down. So, which shows that there is a conscious effort being made, and probably this is one of the reason. And I'm sure if these guardrails are put in by SROs and people follow these guardrails, I'm sure this will have a positive impact. Though the quantum of impact is still unknown, it will only be reflected in next couple of quarters. But definitely this is a positive sign, and this is something which has already started showing benefit.
Okay. You know, Aishwary, you, in your latest report, you have a table, and that table will come up. It was flashing even as Mr. Seth was speaking, that the rate of growth of loan outstandings was far quicker than the rate of growth of rural wages, both agri and non-agri. So this is an income problem. Incomes didn't grow as fast as consumption or as fast as maybe inflation.
I think the average debt outstanding per borrower, that also increased significantly over the last 2 to 3 years. Plus, the agri wage growth was not keeping pace with this over leveraging or the increase in the average debt stock outstanding per borrower. Not only the microfinance borrowings, but also the other borrowings also increased during this period. It's only during this current year, I mean, we are seeing that average outstanding per borrower is declining because of the guardrails being put in place. We expect this to continue in the second half of FY25 also and FY26 also, with the second set of guardrails coming in. It is good for the long term, but yeah, in the short term, it will have some impact on the delinquencies.
Okay. You know, the problem that rural India did not have enough to pay back, which Anu Jogesh is telling us, that it was almost always urban remittance which is helping them pay back, is a long-standing problem. It's not something that happened yesterday. Is it that in the last, say, post-COVID, when we had a rush of foreign money coming in, PE money, did people overlend? Was there an over-enthusiasm on the part of some microfinance guys? Chandan, Thakur, was that the situation? PE paisa tha, bahut aa raha tha, you know, in 21 and all, we saw excellent FDI flows and PE flows. Were they a little ambitious or reckless in terms of the expectations of returns?
See, post-COVID, of course, since as I mentioned also, like the demand was quite high, and there were some, disbursement as well that perhaps leads to the, the region of over leveraging on all. But one thing I always feel, and as I mentioned, like a bit of distress in the rural India, a bit of issue in terms of the income of the people. I mean, in addition to the domestic issue, if you see the external factors, there are many people, Indians who work abroad, particularly a country like Israel and other places. They had to come back. And all those remittance and all. If you see the situation, like Bihar is one of the top states in terms of the microfinance. People from Bihar, they have been working in various states. But again, the climate part, we saw in the month of May, there was major issue.
Climate is...
Entire nation was under red alert. The southern India because of heavy rain, eastern India because of cyclone, northern India and western India because of reeling under severe heat. So all these have affected the repayment power. But of course, as with all the guidelines, with all the guardrails, with all the preventive measures, things are looking
on
better.
The mend.
MFIs are also looking really good.
I take your point. I think one of the big takeaways that is coming is that things are peaking in the third quarter and they will stabilize in the fourth quarter, and it'll take only 3 quarters for it to come down. That may be H2 of FI. That is a very important point that I'm taking away. But there are two other factors that I want to discuss. Reserve Bank says that MFI loans the debt servicing should not be more than 50% of the household's income. But how do you assess households' income in places like this? That's one problem I want to ask my panel after this break. Welcome back. We've been discussing the rising default rate in the microfinance sector. I've been speaking with Aishwary Khandelwal of India Ratings, Chandan Thakur of Sa-dhan, the SRO, Sachin Seth, the MD of CRIF, the credit scoring company, and Anu Jogesh, a journalist turned researcher from the London School of Economics, studying sustainable finance in rural North India. Gentlemen, and Anu, thank you very much for your time. Anu, you know, with your feet on the ground, you've been a FMCG reporter. We speak about numbers very easily. Reserve Bank rule is that household should not be given so much loan that the debt servicing is more than 50% of their income. But is income measurable there?
No. In fact, it's actually pretty hard. Income is variable. It depends on the crop cycle. It depends on whether you're able to access both Kharif and Rabi, and certainly in areas that are flood inundated or have other environmental change. Often
non-agri.
Non-agri as well. You know, you have men who go seasonally.
Poultry farmers.
Yeah, well, poultry as well, right? If you're doing pashupalan, as they say, if you're managing goats, if you're managing all of the other sort of animal husbandry and cattle, how do you tell? How do you tell, you know, what you're sort of selling? What is the market rate? No, you know, and often when I spoke to women as well, what was their total interest outlay? You know, some microcredit agencies will collect weekly, some collect fortnightly, some collect monthly. They don't know how much is even going out. How do you make that calculation that your total outgo has to be a certain value? And it's, you know, very informal ways of finding out whether this person can pay well. Part of it is the joint liability group, vouching. Part of it is you seeing if the shop belongs to so-and-so. We even had cases where a lot of loan officers would say, we need the spouse's, the husband's signature, but the husband's away. So they will present a J to their, anyone who is essentially available as a male figure or a neighbor to sign for them. And then we'll come back and say, well, we never agreed to this loan because...
Okay, because it's not the correct person who's signing.
Yeah.
Okay. Sachin, when you all have to do the credit scoring, is it really possible to assess marketable surplus of these households? For that matter, income, 3 lakh rupees, can you really assess it?
Yeah. So, Latha, again, I think as we all know, and as Anu did mention that, you know, how these people take the loan or how they do basically disclose their income, expense details, etc. So it is, I mean, I would say that accuracy levels differ, but there are methods which are being used. And as per the guidelines, the data is of the family members are also being taken. But yes, it is not as accurate as you would see in an urban population. But there are other methods also being used by some of the lenders, like if you could use, if the borrower is using, bank account and they share the consent for account aggregator, or they basically allow lender to basically take the data as an account score as well, then it is possible. But then if there are quite a lot of income is in cash, then it is more of an estimation about that what business is in, what would be basically the potential income. So it may not be very accurate, but yeah, there are some assumptions which people make based on their, experience.
Okay. Chandan, what is the immediate trigger for this cycle of bad loans? Last time we were told demonetization, there was an unusual reason. This one apparently has come in prosperous times because India's GDP itself was 8.2% in FY24. The year before as well, it was over 7%. And it was not as if we had a very severe famine. Yes, we had an El Nino year and excessive heat. But what was the immediate trigger for the rise in defaults?
So, I mean, in addition to a few points that have been discussed, I feel there are some external factors as well that we can consider. Like, we know since the sector is we always deal with the vulnerable set of community and the population. Some external factors in terms of a bit of political things, like we know there was Karz Mukti Abhiyan, there was a movement in few of the states, like primarily it was quite active in the state of Punjab, Rajasthan, Odisha, and those parts. So that affected the things. Okay. Again, if you see the factor like food inflation and all, it's quite high. So I mean, these are the gradual thing that somehow affected the repayment capacity of the borrowers. Yeah. And suddenly, we know, there are, in terms of the loan factor, at times one loan from the other, and even there are some needy companies and unregulated institutions as well, which will lend in disguise of MFIs and all. So that's the reason we have been taking up with the Reserve Bank as well as PFS.
No, I agree with you, because that's why Reserve Bank actually tried to give up regulating the sector and told the state governments to regulate, because there are a lot of unregulated lending entities. But Anu, the other part which Chandan mentioned in some graphic detail, extent of attrition of people, just not wanting the job of collection agents in the face of extreme heat. Many of them said that they had a high turnover of staff, and therefore, was that a problem you could actually see?
Well, I went post-monsoons, and there were other issues. But I did speak with a lot of loan officers about the extreme heat, the 52 degrees, what did that look like, certainly in parts of North India that I was there. And I think it's important to note that they're very much tied to the targets that the branch managers set, the cluster managers set. Many of them said, we dipped our gamchas in cold water, tied it on our head, put in the helmets and went. So it's not true always that a lot of them sort of resign in the places where I asked. They had a job. I mean, it's important to also note a lot of the loan officers who take these jobs were actually in search of that sarkari naukri that they didn't get. And so whilst these can be short-term jobs, they're sort of in between while they're applying for other things, this is still something that pays in income, and they definitely do it. It is strenuous, but they certainly do it. I also do want to sort of add, and I think it's a very important point because we're looking quarter to quarter at this, but there's some underlying fundamentals why microfinance suddenly does as well as it does in certain spaces. It's to do with, apart from incomes, of course, it's to do with how well the National Rural Livelihoods Mission is doing, whether the SHGs are working in a certain space and women are able to borrow and lend, or if it's broken down because of local power and caste relations, right? And that also shapes why people will go into microcredit. Of course, environmental change to some extent is playing a role. How many what your crop loss is, whether your men working outside have the capacity. So, one of the things Aishwary and I were discussing yesterday when we met was that, was it always just the loan officers who likely resigned, or was it also people who just couldn't get to the fields and do the work, and so weren't able to pay back as well? These are not disembedded relations. A lot of loan officers are also working very closely, trying to understand. So, and they're very different power networks that work. And these are underlying things that don't go away.
Fair point.
And access to direct benefit transfers. It's uneven. In the spaces
everybody's not getting it.
I have had so many instances of women who've said, we couldn't borrow directly from the bank. We didn't get the Awas Yojana. We borrowed from microcredit and several to build our house. Okay. And then when we did get some sort of a pakka structure...
Because the paperwork and the bureaucracy is still tough.
Or the local pradhan is just not of the same caste, of the same sort of community. So many factors. But that also means that tomorrow when I have some fundamental sort of structure, I don't qualify for Awas. So all of these work together. Credit flows work very, very sort of
Anu, we can talk to you for a very long time to get this, the nuance, the color that, paints the pain in rural India. Unfortunately, out of time. Can you all give me a monosyllabic answer? Aishwary, Chandan and Sachin. Sachin, is your assessment that the worst pain was Q3 and Q4 will ebb?
Well, I may not be able to predict, but I want to use this time to give you some more insights. One is that we have seen that people having retail loan and MFI loan, the default rate is high, and there are 14.3% people like that. Second is that, like I said, the number of borrowers are reducing, number of lenders are reducing per borrower. So these two could be some of the factors which people can consider, and that would help the situation to improve better.
Fair point. That's most helpful. Chandan, I think you have been saying that. Worst pain is Q3, Q4 it will ebb.
Exactly, Latha. So I'm so things should get better. And even day before yesterday, we had a very good meeting with the Secretary DFS, and the entire sector was there. And we requested some of the support from the government, like in terms of the funding part, like the.
Are they giving you a guarantee? I think you'll ask for a guarantee, like.
Exactly. So we asked for the dedicated fund for the MFI, perhaps a credit guarantee mechanism as well. Some fund for the northeastern region. So we are really hopeful, with support of the government and the sector will things will get better.
Aishwary, Q4 is better than Q3?
So I would say, the decline in delinquencies will not further decline, but the adjustment will start from Q4 onwards.
Got it. Thank you very much, gentlemen and Anu, for an extremely comprehensive and nuanced discussion on the microfinance sector. We all better understand the problem. We hope the solutions will come. Thanks much for watching this show.